or easy. Nobody has to remind us to offer any of those, yet they don't mix well with the kindness, mercy, grace, and favor that the Almighty God has shown every single one of us. We have to learn to have gratitude. Children don't come out the womb saying thank you. No, you have to teach them that along with please and may I. Some folk may need to go back to the basics because the fundamentals of gratitude seem to be lost. Lord, help us today. I find very few people, when you hold the door for them, that say thank you. I find very few people that shop at the grocery store and you let them get in front of you say thank you for doing that. I find very few young people, even in the school system, that know how to say please and may I or thank you. We live in a world where people don't appreciate what it is to have gratitude for something someone has done for them. And they don't even owe you anything, so you ought to be grateful for what they do. Joseph did not fail to teach his children gratitude, even though he had cause to be ungrateful. He was not ungrateful. You know his story. He was abandoned, enslaved, betrayed, estranged, incarcerated, and yet it is hard to find moments of bitterness in his story. What we discover, however, are two rather dramatic gestures of gratitude. It's right here in the text. He and his wife gathered together and they named their children, and they called the child, naming even in scripture something so important to name a child. It was no small responsibility, and we know that name sticks with you for life. Wherever a child goes or is introduced, the parents' decision about their name will be remembered, and so most parents go to great lengths to select the perfect name for their children. Now, with some of the names that's on the roll at my school, I wonder sometimes what was going on in their mind when they named that child. I know Joseph had a reason for naming his children the way he did. The text opens during the days of abundance. God had rewarded Joseph with a place in Pharaoh's court, now a wife and a home of his own. And I need to pause right here for a station identification to say that somebody needs to be reminded again that God is a rewarder. Hebrews 11:6 says, but without faith it's impossible to please him, for the one who comes must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Is there anybody in here that's got some faith and say, I've been seeking the Lord and I know that he will be diligent to reward me? We serve God, we praise God, and we follow God not to be rewarded, but we can be thankful that God does reward the faithful. And God saw everything that happened in Joseph's life. God knew everything that transpired. God permitted those things to unfold in his life. And in God's own timing, God flipped the script and reversed the curse and turned the tables and rewarded Joseph with stability, security, and success. And I need a witness just to say amen right here, because you can testify that God has flipped some things in your life and reversed some stuff and caused you to be stable in unstable places, have security in insecure times, and have success in unsuccessful conditions. You did not come through it without some pain, nor did it happen quickly, but God did turn it around for you. Finally, Joseph has his family. Just envision for a moment this young couple comfortable in their home on the couch, and Joseph talks to the baby bump. And he talks to his wife Asenath and says, we're going to name him God Made Me Forget, Manasseh. So that every time my son's name is spoken, God God will be glorified, because God made me forget all the pain, the misery, the mistreatment, and the hurt that I experienced by the hands of my brothers. And I want everybody to know and remember, I want God to know that I'm grateful for what God did for me. It's amazing when you think about it that God is able to so compensate you and change things for you and around you, that whatever you went through to get to this moment fades into the background. You don't cry as much about it. You don't fret over it like you used to. It's a process, but you've gotten to the point. And I know somebody's asking, how do you get there? I'm glad you asked. Lesson number 1. He was not stuck in the pain of his past. Consider the series and the progression of suffering and injustices that Joseph went through, but he didn't allow bitterness and pain to become residents in his heart. He overcame the gravity of bitterness and resentment and pain and the desire to get vengeance, and he proved himself victorious by God's grace. He was victimized, but never the victim. He was mistreated, he was kidnapped, thrown into a pit, sold not once but twice as a slave. He was falsely accused, put in prison, ignored by the baker, forgotten about the butler, but he did not permit the negatives in his life to destroy his life. And somebody stated it well. They said, we are products of our past, but we don't have to be slaves to it. He did not let self-pity become his plight. He stepped through every negative and used them all in a positive way. He proclaims in this situation, as for you, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for my good. He didn't allow the negatives to get to you. And I can't resist the urge to pause to thank God for the pain that God brought in my life to get me to the point that I'm at right now with the wisdom and the knowledge I have. And I suspect that I'm not by myself. Somebody else, God has dried your tears and calmed your fears and extended your years. God has gone before you, walked beside you, and come up behind you, turned your pain into gain, your struggle into strength, your irritation into inspiration, your misery into melody, and your agony into a symphony. And it's not happened all yet for your life. If it's not happened right yet, you can still rejoice in the expectation that God at any moment can still turn things around completely and awesomely and give you what you stand in need of. Do I have a witness in here? Oh, you can shout, you can stand. I'll never forget helping my uncle and my grandfather with moving some dirt that had started to rain. It became mud. Mud was holding my boots. Quickly, I became stuck in that mud. Hollering out, help me. I'm stuck. Trying to move, but I was going further down. My grandfather looked at me and he almost said, you dang on fool, just take your feet out the boots. Lord help me in here. And sometimes you stuck by what is holding you or by what you're holding to. Good God Almighty. But either way, you got to work your way out of it. Look at your neighbor and tell your neighbor, work your way out of this thing. Not only was he stuck, but in pain of his past, he did not allow those circumstances to not only hold him and be stuck in the pain of his past, but he also, lesson 2, also he cherished the circumstances of the present moment. He named his first child, God Made Me Forget. Now, some measure of forgiveness is a prerequisite to fruitfulness. If you want to be fruitful, you have to pull out the weeds in the garden that can smother the fruit. Preach, Pastor, I'm trying. In other words, don't allow allow old grudges and old hurts to smother the new blessings God has planted in you. You have to be willing to release the past if you ever hope to receive the present. And I feel a Teddy P anointed. I think you better let it go. God, I think you better let it go. He said, God made me forget. God made it possible for me to get my mind off and stop concentrating on what was done to me so that I could focus on and appreciate what was being done for me. Somebody listening to me now needs to thank God that God can do you like Men in Black and erase the memory of the things that hurt you and happened to you. And somebody has to remind you how bad it was because you trusted God for what God has for you in your life now. But only let it be a moment of remembrance so you can cherish the circumstances of the present, because this moment right here, this is the day that the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. I'll help out and say it one more time. This is the day that the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. I'm hoping that you would start following the instructions there. I will rejoice. Hello, walls. Hello, lights. Thank you, carpet. I will rejoice and be glad in it, because God made the day and only God can control the day. Can't nobody mess up your day when God is in charge of the day, and you ought to give God praise. This is the day that the Lord has made. He woke me up. I'm going to be glad and rejoice therein. His first child was named Manasseh. God made me forget. But the name of the second child is Ephraim, which means God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Look at the shift in the text, the shift that precedes his success. In the same place where I could not serve, God permitted me to supervise. In the same place where I had nothing but pain, God promoted me. In the same place where I was oppressed, God impressed his deliverance in my life. And I have to let you know right there that I'm right there in my life and right in the circumstances. You can be right where you are and right in the condition you have, in the situation you're in the same place, and God can do something awesome. You don't always have to leave. You can always trust God that God can do something right where you are. Right where you are. If you think of the power of God works in moving, then can you imagine what it is for God to keep you in some stuff that you know you want to get out of? Then you can sure enough shout, God met me where I was and blessed me right where I am. Joseph recognized the presence of God. Whether in slavery or in prison or in promotion, he acknowledged the sovereignty of God. In his circumstances, whether crisis or celebration, he understood that the secret of his survival was the presence of God in him and with him. That is why he made it. That's why he could take it. And that's how he overcame. That's why he was victorious, because God was walking by his side. And you do know that God's presence makes all the difference. The question with God is never how big the problem is, or how high the mountain, or how vicious the enemy, or how brutal the storm, or how desperate your need. What matters is God's presence. And if God is with us, we will emerge. And if God is with us, we will rise. And if God is with us, we will win in the end. Joseph says, God made me forget, and then God made me fruitful. And as as a result, I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. With one name, Joseph honored God's mercy, and with another, he proclaimed God's favor on his life. If Joseph could do that in naming his children and showing his gratitude, then what's wrong with some of us? Sometimes we have a tendency to be ungrateful and not satisfied. One thing does not work out right, then we negate all the good that took place. We have to learn how to be grateful. Can I explain it for you? Let me explain it. Several years ago when my grandmother died, hands-on volunteers decided they would help us out at my grandparents' house to make the yard look presentable for the family to meet there. And that day, it was athletes and celebrity day for them to come and do some yard work at people's home. So guess who showed up at my grandmother's house to help us in the yard? Will Smith showed up from the Saints. He showed up and he worked. And later that day, Will Smith gave me tickets to see the Saints game. That day, I got my ticket. I got to the dome with my ticket, and I had my ticket in hand, and it said section 200, but it had nothing for the row, and it had nothing for the seat, and it had nothing for the gate. I made my way looking for 200 after walking, and the game has started. I said, let me ask somebody. I saw an usher, and I asked, and she said, you're in the right section, but the level is club VIP. I wanted to tell that woman, you don't know what, you about to make me want to shout. Throw my hands up and shout. Put my hands together, shout. Oh, we maneuvered our way around to the clubhouse room, and there was food and drinks and favors, and I was amped up. I was relaxed and excited. I did not know anybody, but I was still glad. However, across from me in the next club was a guy who was complaining about something that he wanted that he could not get. And then there was me smiling from ear to ear, just like Pharrell, happy, happy, happy. Look at the contrast. One grumbling on one side and one grateful on the other side. What was the difference? Cranky over there, I assumed paid for his ticket, but my ticket was a gift. Which side of the aisle are you on? Are you in the world that somebody owes you something, or grateful for whatever God does for you? So I have a witness in here. You gotta be thankful each moment, seize each day. Be thankful for another day. Be grateful for his grace that kept you. God will allow you to celebrate in circumstances. I'm about to sit down. It's subtle. I got a minute. It's subtle. Don't miss it. It's subtle. In verse 51, Joseph said, God made me. And then in verse 52, he said, for God has caused me. After the dust settles and the trials end, Joseph the dreamer quickly realized that what he had achieved was just the execution of the promise and the plan of God. He had come through all of that in order to get to this. It was God moving the events of his life, not people. It was God moving the events of his life, not his enemies. It was God that was moving, and he was grateful. He was able to celebrate the promise of his future because he knew that God ultimately was in control. What I believe, you have to realize that Manasseh and Ephraim are named. They just don't know what they are named for and why. They don't understand. They know what it means, but they don't know what he went through to have to name them what he named them. Joseph's gratitude, watch this, impacted his offspring. I expect every grandparent and parent to shout right here, because gratefulness should be so genuine that it impacts somebody in your family and the grandchildren and children you've had. And out of thankfulness, you will see that the good and the bad can work for your good and work out just for you. You will find yourself thanking God for stuff that others take for granted. Millions of stars twinkle twinkle in the night. Thank you, Lord. A miracle of muscles function to give me the activity of my limbs and causes my eyes to open and my ears to hear. Thank you, Lord. Your lungs inhale and exhale 11,000 liters of air every day. Thank you, Lord. Your heart beats 3 million times in your lifetime. Thank you, Lord. Your brain is functioning thoughts and processing this sermon. Thank you, Lord, for the smaller things. Thank you, Lord, for bread on my table, butter for my bread, milk in my cereal, a bed to lay my head, a blanket that keeps me warm, for jokes that make